And hello, I'm Marcus Borden from MyCentralJersey.com, football analyst. We're here today at South River High School to talk about the 100th anniversary of football. To my right, we have Mr. Rich Marchese, the head football coach. Okay, we have Mike Lepore, assistant football coach and the head baseball coach. To my left, we have Mr. Fred Roselli, who is, I would say, the voice of the Rams, and of course a great historian too. And to his left, we have Mr. Carl Buffalino, who is the athletic director here at South River High School. So I think I'll start my first question with Coach Marchese, and I think this is a pretty easy one, Coach. You are the winningest coach here at South River High School. That in itself is a great accomplishment. We know that this stadium out there is called the Bill Denny Stadium. He was the winningest football coach here, and now you have that title. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's a great honor to put some years in and kind of taught the kids, I think, the same way as it's been taught for that Bill Denny taught kids and taught not only football but taught life skills and what's right and what's wrong in school and out of school, but kind of carry on that tradition of what Coach Denny started, and some of the other great coaches, Bill Shateri, Ron Wojcicki, Joe Bellissimo, have followed suit, and I'm just kind of following suit there and keeping the flame alive, and things are going pretty well.
You know, that's well, we're talking about a legacy here, and you have continued that legacy. There are certain traditions and things that are done here at South River that aren't done in other programs. So let me talk to Mr. Buffalino about that one, since you're the athletic director. What are some of the South River traditions that may not be the same in other schools?
Well, I think, Marcus, if we start with this week, in 2 weeks we're going to celebrate the 100 years of football with South River, but this week we have homecoming. And I think homecoming at South River is just unique and is unlike it is anywhere else. For example, this week we have competitions between our classes, between freshmen, juniors, sophomores, and seniors. Today was Ethnicity Day, so the kids got to wear their shirts or whatever, or their colors, or their flags of wherever they were born, whatever nationality they represent. So we had a whole bunch of nationalities running around the school today. We have Pajama Day, we have Color Day, we have Maroon and Gray Day. So we kind of build up until Friday, and Friday we have our spirit game. So the schools, the classes compete in different shooting, basketball shooting, and hula hoops, and jump ropes, and things like that. So it all builds up, and all week they are doing floats. They're leaving school. They're going to football practice, soccer practice. Then they're going to build floats. So once they're done building floats, all building up to Saturday. On Saturday, we have a big parade through town. We start downtown, we go all the way up Main Street, and eventually end up here at Denny Stadium. So between the floats and the homecoming kings and the queens, and then our dance, then a football game, and then our dance on Saturday night. I think South River does homecoming great, and I think South River does homecoming in a unique way.
There's no doubt about it. Being a resident of South River myself, I have had the opportunity to see some of those floats being made up at the fire company.
Right.
They're kept there. The kids are there. I see them. They've been there at night to putting things together. It's just a phenomenal thing. And not many schools still do that. And you are a traditional school in that respect. And of course, the parade, the whole deal, makes it an exciting event in the town.
Yes.
Talking about history, I got a historian next to me, and there's no doubt about it that Fred Roselli has great knowledge of the school and its history and its football program. So I'm going to start off right off the bat, Fred, because I know you've been passing out some numbers and talking about it, but you've already come up with your own top 4 teams that you think in the history of South River. Could you tell us about that?
I have to thank Al Loswitz for a lot of it, because back years ago he got me information on the earlier ones, but I've worked it down to 4 teams, and I'll do them in reverse order. The 1979 team that played went 10-0-1. They put up 302 points, only gave up 55, had 5 shutouts. The number 3 team I have is the 1966 team. No offense to Joey T. or Tommy Barra, but I had them ranked as number 3. They were 9-0. They scored 269 points, gave up 34, had 6 shutouts, and only 1 team scored more than 7 points against them. The number 2 team, a lot of people may not be aware of, I have is the 1933 squad. They went 10-0, scored 305 points, only gave up 21 with 6 shutouts, and one team got 7 points against them. And the number one squad I have amongst all of them is the 1978 class. They went 11-0, scored 395 points in one season, averaging between 35 and 40 points a game. Gave up a total of 26 points in 11 games, 7 shutouts, and nobody reached 7 points against them.
Whoa.
That's my top 4.
I'd say there's some impressive, you got some impressive teams there. You know, we have 24 state championships won here at this school, 24. We have, as I see here on this shirt that Coach gave me when I came by in the camp caravan, I'm looking at the list here. We got 3 All-Pros. We've got 6 guys that were All-American college football players. We have a guy that's in the College and Pro Football Hall of Fame, Alex Wojciechowicz. Can you tell us a little bit about him while we're at that?
Sure.
'Cause I think you have a little history about him.
Alex Wojciechowicz graduated class in 1932. During his tenure here, the team went 44 wins and only 6 losses. They were able to put together 2 state championships. In 1933, they went 10-0, gave up a total of 21 points. But Alex went to Fordham, was one of the 7 blocks of granite, played with Vince Lombardi. After that, went on, he was All-American at Fordham 2 years in a row. And after that, he went on, finished 4th in the Heisman voting back then. And lastly, played both for the Lions and Eagles and would have won the equivalent of the Super Bowls. They didn't have Super Bowls back in the
Correct.
30s, but they won the league championships in 1948 and 1949.
You know, when you come to the stadium, you see those banners here on the fence. You see the numbers painted on the back of the Bill Denny Stadium. There's so much history here. But Coach Lepore, you also won a state championship, 1983. Talk to me about that experience that you had in that season and what it was like to be another one of the guys that brought home a state title.
Yeah, 1983 was my sophomore year. I really didn't have much of a role as a sophomore back then. You really didn't get much varsity time. We did have two guys that were sophomores that played varsity, that played on offense, Joey Chipkowski and Sidney Crawford. But as my job on that team was to be the holder for the kicker, and I was also on kickoff, so I did, limited role. But what I remember about that team is we had a great coaching staff, and every player all the upperclassmen, it was great leadership. They bought into what the coaches were saying. It was Coach Shateri, Coach Ruiz, my dad, Coach Lepore Sr., and Coach Walt Kajadik. And Coach Kajadik was a defensive wizard. And we had a lot of talent, but we didn't have the names like, we didn't have a Kenny Jackson, we didn't have a Troy Hill, we didn't have the big names. We had South River guys that were tough, that were smart, and that they played the game the right way. And we had come off 2 years that we hadn't won a state championship. We won 4 straight from 77 to 80. And in 81, we lost in the semifinals to Middlesex. 82, we lost in the finals to Middlesex. And then 83, we got back in there. Our semifinal game was against Keensburg. We won 10-0 that game. And then the final was at home against Denellen, and we won 21-7. And that's the last time we've won a state championship on our home turf.
There's been several guys, and you're one of them, that have been players and now are coaching.
Yeah.
What drove you back to the
Obviously,
coaching angle?
In 1977, my dad became on the staff. Coach Shateri asked him to get on the staff in 77. I was 9 years old. So I never missed a game from 77 till up to this year, where I actually stepped down this year as a coach. I'm still involved in the program, talking to coach about a lot of things. But I got involved because watching and being involved and watching South River football, never losing. They didn't lose. They lost their first game in 77, 2-0 against North Brunswick in a mud game. And after that, they won. They didn't lose for 37 straight games, which the streak was actually broken in 1980 by Spotswood, which we got revenge on them in the state finals in 1980 by beating them. But yeah, going back to players that played, we love the game. We love South River football. It meant something to put that uniform on. And then when I got a teaching job here, I lucked out and there was a coaching position. And the same thing goes for Jimmy Makowitz. Eddie Chicky was a player here that became a coach. Jimmy Makowitz, Ian Ivanovich, Joey Shateri, the Young
A long
brothers.
list, believe me.
Joey Young,
Joey the Youngs.
Bobby Young, you know, and
They're
I
all-
can go on and on that have, you know,
Yeah.
they love the game. They love South River football, and that's why they're back.
You know, it's Coach Marchese, you were under Coach Sateri. I know Bill, you know, when I first got here in '83, Booney, I know Coach Kajotic. I mean, you know, guys that bled the colors, you know, maroon and gray. Talk to me about playing for Coach Sateri.
Wow, there's a lot of respect there because he didn't get the nickname Wild Bill for no reason. He had a way of doing things that I remember, unlike today's rules with the state involved, we used to practice 3 hours a day, probably pretty much full contact for 2.5, 3 hours. We would be lucky to get a water break. We got a water break, he would time it, so there would be like a 30-second or a 1-minute water break, and then we'd be on the practice field, and the water would be 75 yards across on the game field, so we had to sprint, again, conditioning, sprint across and then come back, and it was a matter of respect. I'm not saying we were afraid to lose, but we were afraid to lose, not for Bill, but afraid to lose because we were playing for South River.
The town.
Exactly.
Right, that's the
Exactly.
difference. You're playing for the town. It's like a Pennsylvania town. When I came here, there was something different about this town compared to some of the other towns. It's a blue-collar town. Talk to me about that.
I can remember Bill on sidelines as a player, and then I was grateful enough to coach with him on his staff when I was a first-year coach, but he would want that play run, whatever it was, a 25 or a 35 or a 41, and if they stopped this, he would just yell it out. It wouldn't matter. The other coach would hear, you know, he wouldn't yell a number. He would just say, "Run it again. We're coming." So he would demand that perfection, and I think that's on the back of our shirts. Tradition, perfection. That's all under Bill Shateri, and I think nowadays in a lot of sports, it's very difficult to attain perfection, but you always want to strive for that. And again, playing under Bill and coaching under Bill. That was one of his mantras, you know, perfection.
You know, you have a school that's won 580 football games. Something's been carried on, a tradition like no other. I mean, when you think of programs in the state of New Jersey, you have to include South River into that because, I mean, it just speaks for itself. And those coaches that have been here have laid the groundwork, and you guys just continue to put brick after brick in there, and your teams come out. There's just nothing like it. So, Fred, Mr. Historian, I mean, you know, you were a classmate of Drew Pearson.
Yes.
You know, he played, I think there's a ball right up here that says he played in the Super Bowl. That's why that gold football's up there. Can you talk to us a little bit about Drew and his legacy here in South River?
One thing you knew about Drew, and a lot of people that grew up around him and all, he was down to earth, but he was a motivator, and he would be able to instill in the other players what was needed. In his earlier years, because back when I was in high school, freshmen weren't playing varsity ball. You know, you had to work your way up to the high school to do that. But he was one of the key receivers for Joey T. when Joe Theismann was here. And when Joe left, Drew stepped right into the quarterback slot. And like it was nothing, he took it over during his senior year, or during his 2 years, going on maybe 2.5 years. He threw for over 3,000 yards. This is a guy who was a receiver all along, fit right into it. He would adjust to whatever the coaches wanted. Put up 29 touchdowns, did a lot. But the nice part about Drew, and good fortune is I still keep in touch with him, whenever he comes back, last year, 2 years ago he was here, Coach Marchese had him here for the breakfast. That's been a tradition here. He took the time out. I was watching because I was at the breakfast, and he took the time out instead of eating, walking around and talking to all the football players. Talking to them, you ready for today's game? You know you got to go out there and be prepared. This was what he does. And these kids would look at him. He had his Super Bowl ring, and Mr. Pearson, can I try that ring on and all? He was so much down to earth, but that's the way he grew up. And he just motivated, never forgot home, If things came up, or they'd be looking to raise funds or something, he'd send over some autographed memorabilia, whether it's by him and the team and the squad and all. Great guy, but definitely a motivator.
So, Carl, the other guy for that other football is Joe Theismann, or shall we call him Joe Theismann?
Right.
Back on campus, a 67 graduate of the high school, celebrated the 50th anniversary a couple years ago.
Yes.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Joe Theismann, working in an all-star game. Tell me a little bit about him and what it was like for the community to have him come back and recognize South River as his hometown.
Yeah, Joe came back, like you said, 2 years ago for his class reunion, and Fred was right. I think it was a year before that Drew came
Yep.
back. So you can kind of put both of them in the same question, in the same
Absolutely.
sentence. And I think, in my opinion, Marcus, I think it's twofold. I think they both took the time to speak to our athletes, to our football players. Drew at breakfast, and then Joe actually came in at halftime and spoke to our kids for a little bit. And I think their perspective, meaning our student athletes, our football players, it's a great opportunity because they can look at Joe and they can look at Drew and they can say, you know what, here's two guys that walked the same streets that I did, played pickup basketball or football in the same parks that I did, kids that sat in the same classroom as I did. And if they can make it, if they can set the goals and the accomplishments and achieve what they did, then why can't I? So I think it's a great motivating factor for our football players and our student athletes to see that and to see these guys come back. Plus, I think on the other side, it's a great opportunity for the town. It's a great opportunity for, to see, just older generations or, anybody sitting in the stands at Denny Stadium kind of looking down and saying, my God, that's Joe, or that's Drew. And being very proud of the town of South River and what's come out of South River. So I think it's awesome for the town, and I think it's just as awesome for the kids that they can look at it and say, I can do that one day.
And I think that's what's so unique is that those guys do come back
Yeah.
and share their experiences, that they're down-to-earth kind of people,
Yep.
that, they played here, they have no problem coming back, and they participate in the activities.
Not to interject, Marcus, but they had in South River a Joe Theismann Day when he was in college, and Texas, which was ranked tops, got knocked off by Notre Dame, where Joe quarterbacked, and they had a parade right up Main Street and all. Mob, you would have thought it was the president. This was the town coming out to him. They awarded him the key to the town and all, but Carl's right. That's just brings the town together.
Tremendous. So, Coach Marchese, there are names that just seem to resonate in South River, the Jacksons, the Hills. I know those names. You know those names. What is it about just churning out player after player? The tradition, the family, the pressure to carry on that name.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, I remember being in school and playing football with Kenny Jackson and Keith Hudak, and all my players were my best buddies. We played for a long time together. We played up through Pop Warner. So, you hear scenarios in other towns where, this team was good X number of years ago and they came up through the Pop Warner. We had the same situation where I was a center and Keith Hudak was a quarterback in Pop Warner, maybe 3 or 4 years leading up to we became freshmen. As freshmen, we had a freshman team. We were undefeated as a freshman team. We played Hammersholt, we played Edison, we played Saraville. We played a number of bigger schools, and we were pretty good. And then in high school, I think just playing under Bill and the way he steered us and the way he took us under his wing, and we had a lot of talent. No doubt we had a lot of talent. We had a lot of confidence. It wasn't being cocky or anything like that. But each one of us was willing to listen. Unlike some athletes today, when you tell them to do things, they want to do things their own way. When Bill Shateri or Michael Poor Sr. or Booney Kajadik, Walt Kajadik would tell us how to do this play or how to get into this stance, yes sir, and that was it. We would correct it. Now times with kids nowadays, you get, I know, they know. So it's a little bit more pulling teeth involved with kids nowadays. Again, when we played, we listened and we were pretty confident in a very, very talented group.
Well, it's, the one thing it is about, it's not a video game. It's blocking and tackling. It's going out.
Thank
and doing
God there was
those
no
things.
video games back when we were in school.
Right.
That's what made
Right.
us.
I mean,
pretty good.
you're not winning a Madden championship.
No.
You're out trying to win a state championship.
When we weren't practicing here, we were probably in someone's backyard tackling and blocking.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we were never worried about that. So, Coach Lepore, you got a chance to play football, and your dad was a coach
Yeah.
out there. How's that sitting at the dinner table?
It was pretty cool. He was my biggest supporter. I remember one good memory I had with him is the night before the championship game. We took a walk up to the field and just walked around and talked, and then the next day we won the whole thing. But it was that's the reason why I coach. That's the reason why I teach. Is just following everything that he did, and
And I know what that walk is up to that feels like, because I spent some time in your Pop Warner program here, coaching the Pop Warners, and saw some of those kids that my son had an opportunity to play with, and then those guys that became stars later on for you, and the walk up to that field, from coming off the side fields over here to walk up into that stadium, there was a little aura to it, and I'm not a South River born guy. I'm a guy that came here, so I knew what it meant to those kids to go up into that stadium.
Probably one of the reasons why I've been here as long as I have. It's hard to get away from that when after breakfast, when you walk up there, or when you go under the stadium or behind the stadium in pregame, and you walk out 10 minutes before the coin toss, and then you come out and that stadium's packed up, and there's definitely a buzz about
we
it.
used to say that we were up 7-0 before the game even started, because it was just an
Home field advantage.
intimidating place to walk into. Coming into that stadium, and still a grass field. A lot of times back in the day when we were in the 70s, we were packed. There was standing room only.
Well,
And,
I know we're getting close to time here, and I want to get into some fast money type questions here. And speaking of that stadium and that grass, how come we don't have lights, Carl? Why does South River not? Why are there no lights here in South River?
That's a tough question, because I could give you about 9 different answers.
Well, I only
But
need a
think
couple.
I'll give you, and I'll make it real quick. I think it is there's been certain opportunities, talk about turf and talk about lights. I just think, as the coaches just said, I think it's the tradition of it where everybody's going turf lights Thursday night, Friday night. We like grass on our football field, and we like Saturday afternoon football games.
You know what? I do
And
too.
I think that's the bottom
I'll
line.
tell you what. I like going out on a Saturday to cover a football game in the day. It's a little different now, because we're so used to Friday night lights. You said Thursday night lights, Wednesday games,
Yeah.
whenever, and now to come on a Saturday, hey, rain or shine, it's just great to go to a Saturday day game. So, Fred, I'm going to ask you, because I know you are involved in the Bill Denny chapter with Rutgers now, as we've joined forces with that, and you're very involved with that. So, while we're talking about Rutgers, since you have a little bit of an insight, who's the next coach?
That one I can't tell you. There's been a lot thrown around. We just had a meeting yesterday, we were talking about it, and you hear possibility Shiano. Hear people, no, we don't want him, he had his time here, someone else along the way. I don't think they know right now. I think they're still looking around to find out what they need to do to get that program turned around.
Right.
Because no matter who they bring up there, it's not going to be a 1 or a 2 year turnaround.
So let's talk about that connection now with the Bill Denny chapter and Rutgers, because now when the scholar athletes, the program has been run with them, joining forces. Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's a fabulous program. Bill Denny chapter was formed in 1968. And originally, and a lot of people may not be aware of it, they wanted to name it the Alex Wojciechowicz chapter. And Alex said, no, if anybody deserves it, it's Bill Denny. Bill Denny made South River football what it was. And what we do is, for 10 months of the year, we go out and we raise funds. Volunteer A, B, C, D, get a hold of corporate sponsors, whoever we can. All the money that we raise, we do a big banquet, usually in March or April. This past year, we hit our pinnacle, broke $25,000 in scholarships that we contribute back. Each town throughout now Middlesex and part of Somerset County submit to us their top scholar athlete. We have nothing to do with the selection of who they are. We then have a committee that will rank them 1 through 35 or whatever it is. it brings out all the good in kids. I have a soft spot for kids. You always read in the paper every day, this kid did this one was arrested. I wish there would be more publicity about the good thing about these kids. When you would go, I had the good fortune to go into some of the national banquets, and you have the 4 top scholars from the United States, and you listen to them, and you just, wow, and this kid's only 17.
So, you know, the Bill Denny chapter has churned out some pretty good scholar athletes.
That they
It's
have.
been a great thing all along. So, Coach Marchese, I got to ask you this. What's with the border war? Spotswood and South River. Talk to me about that. What is
Sure,
that?
absolutely. When I was an underclassman here, for example, when I was a freshman, I had, Spotswood went to this school, so we were a mixture of South River and Spotswood kids, got along well. I believe my sophomore year, they decided to build a high school over in Spotswood. Those athletes and those students went over to there. My junior year, they actually started football, and it was a JV program. And then again, my senior year, our final year, they played varsity football for the first time. And that's kind of where where that border war started. And it's a good, healthy rivalry.
Oh, it is.
Not only in
Yes.
football, but in all
Yes.
sports.
Yes, it is.
Them breaking our 37-game winning streak probably.
I think the 500th win, though, was against Spotswood, the
Yeah.
way I
Yeah.
see right
There's been
here,
some-
in
there's been some,
2004.
It's fallen
So,
into place that
I
way
mean, that must have
somehow.
that worked out real nice. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So, Coach, let me ask you: you've played, you've coached baseball, you've coached football. In your estimation, who's one of the best all-around athletes out of South River?
No doubt about it. My opinion, no doubt about it, was probably Kenny Jackson. I mean, I grew up watching him play. I was the ball boy while he was playing. I remember just watching him. He had so much speed, and he was just so much better than anybody else on the field. One time against Highland Park, I'm pretty sure it was against Highland Park, he broke one, and he was so far away from everybody else, he turned around and handed the ball off to one of the linemen that was trailing him and let the lineman score the touchdown. You remember that?
Yeah, sure.
But as a you know, involved in South River football, Kenny had to be one of the best athletes. He was first team All-State Star Ledger in football, first team All-State Star Ledger in basketball, and first team All-State Star Ledger in track.
And 2-time tournament of champions winner
Yeah,
in
and
track.
he also played baseball as a freshman, and it was pretty good from what I heard from my dad. One of the best athletes that I've ever coached in my 25 years here, I don't want to make his head any bigger than it is, but it's probably got to be Mike Feaster. He was a 2-time state champ.
I think he was a pretty good player. I think.
He had a pretty good career here in all
Yeah.
sports.
Well, you know, I'm sure we could sit here and talk all day, and I know Coach has to get to practice because we have a homecoming game on Saturday here against Dunellen. We are celebrating that 100 years. I know you got a new jersey that you'll be wearing. I'm sure the kids are excited about it. I'm going to be excited to be here to experience the thrill of what you guys are all about here in South River. I'd like to thank Mr. Joe DeRold, who is the official videographer for MyCentralJersey.com. He's also involved in the Autoland Classic. And, of course, I certainly want to thank Greg Tafaro from My Central Jersey for setting us up today. It was a great time to have an opportunity to talk to you guys. I'm sure we could sit down at 33s and talk for hours about South River football. But it's been my pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank you and see you on Saturday, 1 o'clock for kickoff against the Dunellen Destroyers.